Hello, and welcome to Writing Rock Solid Clinical Goals, Objectives, and Benchmarks, Keep It Simple, Part 1. My name is Mary Jane Landacre, and this is a presentation that I first offered in St. Louis at the AMTA National Conference. And I decided to put it into three separate files, primarily because that makes it easier to post up into the internet. So you have access to all three files, and hopefully this information will help you come up with specific ways to write goals and objectives and benchmarks in a way that's kind of understandable. The presentation itself came out of my own learning experiences as an undergrad, where my professors and my supervisors would say, this is how you write goals, and this is how you write objectives. And I would write down my goals and objectives, and they'd say, yeah, no, that's not right. And I'd say, but I did it exactly the way you said to do it. And they'd say, yeah, but it's not right. And I'd say, okay, so how do I do it? And it took a while for me to figure out what they were looking for and to put it into Mary Jane speak. And so that's how this presentation came about. Years and years and years of thinking and trying to make sure that I could figure out how to do specific goals and objectives. So hopefully this will help clarify things for some folks. So during today, as you can see, I am very much assisted by my assistants here. This is Bella. She shows up for almost every webinar I give, so welcome. So today, by the end of this presentation, I hope that you'll be able to find a way to develop goals, objectives, and benchmarks that are easy to track during sessions that include multiple data points, many clients in group treatment, and or large caseloads, because that's one of the things that I've noticed is that as my caseload increased, my ability to take data in the ways I was taught and modeled at school decreased because I was having difficulties tracking duration recording for one student and frequency counts for another student and play checks for another student, and then more durations when I had 12 clients in a group who were all there for music therapy purposes. And so because of that, this presentation came up with a focus on how to take multiple data points for groups. And when we get to section 3, part 3, we'll really talk about that a little bit more in depth. But at the moment, we're going to focus in on some basic assumptions that I made about you, the audience. I had to do it because I didn't know for sure how much time I would have during the presentation, and turns out I had plenty of time to chat. But I assumed that if you were looking at this particular presentation, that you are either someone who struggles with the concept of writing clinical goals and objectives, or you are somebody who teaches people who struggles with the concept. And so I based the presentation on us as the people who struggle with these kinds of concepts and ideas. I appreciate feedback, so at any time, if you would like to send me questions, comments, or concerns, you can send it to me at contactus@musictherapyworks.com, and that email address will be repeated at the end of part 3. Okay, so the purpose of this is trying to make it easier for us all. And if you are someone who has problems with math, I'm going to be showing you some mathematical equations that I've come up with that kind of illustrate this process. Don't panic when you see the next slide, because I will definitely explain what I mean here. It should make sense. So I came up with a formula, a way for me to think about what I needed to have in my clinical goals and objectives in order for them to make sense and in order for them to be something that I can easily track during my sessions. And so here are a couple of operators that need to happen that I will explain as we get going here. Anytime you see a capital D or a capital O together, that means desired outcome. If you see a small d and a small o, that also means desired outcome, but that does not mean the same thing as when you see it in capital format, and I'll explain that in just a little bit. When you see a small o at the beginning of something, that is an objective. And for purposes of this presentation, objectives are the steps that you take in order to get to your big DO, your big desired outcome. And so there are all of the objectives need to be working towards that desired outcome, that end goal. If you see ODO, that means the objective desired outcome. So the target that you're working for with your objective. In the same way, a little b equals benchmark. And for purposes of special education, we have desired outcome, which is our long-term goal, which is usually in special education, it's usually increasing independence, so that way folks can live in the least restrictive environment after school. And then we have annual objectives. And then we have benchmarks, which are usually quarterly in nature and are usually cumulative that work towards the objective. So if you think of it as desired outcome as your long-term goal, your objective as your annual goal, and your benchmark as your treatment goals, it tends to make the most sense. Not everybody uses the terminology of benchmark, but I wanted to make sure that you had some grounding in the language just in case. If you ever see a BDO, that means the benchmark desired outcome. Here are some other operators that I used. TA equals task analysis. And a task analysis is where you take a large skill, like a desired outcome, and you split it into smaller skills in order to complete that desired outcome. So for example, if we have a desired outcome of steady, smooth gait, let's use a walking example. A task analysis is going to be something similar to, we need to figure out what our current speed of gait is. We need to figure out what the current pattern of gait is. We need to figure out in order to have smooth gait, you need to be able to have hip flexion, and you need to be able to have knee flexion, and you need to be able to have ankle flexion. You need to have a sense of physical entrainment to an external stimulus. You need to be able to do lots of different things in order to get to a gait. And we find those lots of different things through a task analysis. AMT is the most polite way I could indicate assessment. And hopefully you all know what an assessment strategy is and how to go through it. And then the last one is the PLP, which means present level of performance. Again, if you're a special educator, you're used to this. It's present level of educational performance, or PLEP. But for these purposes, PLP, present level of performance, is the operator I'm going to use for this. And basically that means the baseline. That means where is your client right here, right now, in this moment. And so it's important to know this, because you're going to base all of your treatment on that particular measurement. So our desired outcome is our goal, like I said before. It is the reason our client is in music therapy, and it is the referral. It is what the client is coming to us for. And for some of us, those are very specific things, like gait patterns and improvement in gait, or a successful, healthy childbirth, or it might be something such as acquisition of the ABCs. This is our termination criterion. When our client masters this large desired outcome, their large goal, we know that they're finished. Now, sometimes our desired outcomes are not as clear-cut. Like, for example, most of the students that I see in my music therapy clinic are referred to me for educational enrichment purposes with psychosocial goals. And so educational enrichment can be anything and everything in between. I mean, there is really no good way to find out when educational enrichment is over, because once educational enrichment kind of gets going, you can shift that into lifelong leisure. And so my desired outcomes don't ever end until the client leaves. But that desired outcome, it provides you with that reason to shape your music therapy treatment, and to also give a chance to terminate that skill or that music therapy service when you need to. Your objective, you get your objectives by taking your desired outcome, whatever that desired outcome is, and dividing it by a task analysis to get the objectives. So if you take your desired outcome, and I would suggest that if you are doing something like this for a population that is pretty static as far as its desired outcomes are concerned, such as if you are working in music-assisted childbirth, then most of your desired outcomes are going to be a healthy, successful childbirth. And so take your desired outcome and do your task analysis and then keep that, because every client that's going to come to you for those types of services is going to have the same desired outcome. And so then you only have to do the work once. If you see multiple types of clients, then you're going to have multiple desired outcomes. You're going to have multiple task analyses. But again, I would keep them because you never know when you're going to need them again. All right, so you take the DO, the desired outcome, and you divide it by a task analysis. And basically, all of the tasks that you come up with for your task analysis are your objectives. So for example, if we're taking, let's say, letter identification, just because it's easy, it's an easy desired outcome that has a very set goal. You take your letter identification and you start to talk about task analysis. Well, first you have to know whether or not the clients can distinguish different letters. Can they distinguish them by shape? Can they distinguish them by sound? The next thing that you're going to look at is their present level of performance. So you're going to take those objectives and you're going to say, all right, my client needs to work on letter identification, and we're going to do letter identification by written letters, both capital letters and small letters. So we take our task analysis and we say, okay, we need to understand whether or not the client is able to recognize the differences in patterns. You know, can you tell which one's the same? Can you tell which one is different? That is one of our objectives. That's one of the tasks that they need to do. Secondly, we need to see, do they have any kind of letter recognition at all? Do they have capital letter recognition? Do they have small letter recognition? So that's two more objectives right there. And then third, we need to be able to see if they can assign those symbols meaning. So we need to see if they can recognize different symbols. Like if I hold up an A card, can they find the simultaneous A card from a choice of 2, 5, 26, whatever it is? And then we need to see if I hold up an A card, can they find apple or alligator cards to understand their meaning? Those are all objectives that we're going to work on. And that forms my assessment, because then I've got, okay, here are the tasks that need to happen. Let's find out where my client is. And that gives us our present level of performance. So I sit down with my assessment materials and I go through the different objectives that I have, the different task areas that I have, and I test my client. And let's say that they recognize all 26 of the lowercase letters, and they recognize 4 out of the 26 of the capital letters. That provides me with my present level of performance. We don't need to work on small letters that much because they already understand the small letters. So that objective is finished. That task is finished on our steps towards our desired outcome. But now I know where they are starting for their capital letters. So I am going to take that present level performance, 4 out of 26, and I am going to multiply that by a criterion, whatever I think is going to work. How long has it taken for them to recognize those 4 letters? If their 4-letter recognition happened in 2 weeks, then I would say that in a year, 100%, having that recognizing all 26 capital letters is something that is very important and they could probably do. If it's taken them 8 years to recognize those 4 capital letters, then I would say that probably 100% in 1 year of treatment is not a realistic goal. So I would take my present level performance, which is 4 out of 26, and I'm going to take that 4 out of 26 and I'm going to multiply it by a criterion. Let's say that I want them to get to 8 letters by the end of the school year, 8 capital letters. So I'm going to take that PLP plus PLP times 100%, because basically I'm wanting them to double their recognition. And that gives me my objective desired outcome. So by the end of the year, I want them to be able to recognize 8 out of 26 capital letters. And that gives me my objective. Now the benchmark is the same thing. So I'm going to take that objective desired outcome, 8 out of 26. I'm going to divide it into a task analysis again to see what's going on. And that's going to give me one of my benchmark desired outcomes. Because maybe it's a shape situation and maybe they need work on shape recognition. Otherwise, I'm going to take it into my PLP and say, okay, I want them to have 4 new letters by such and such a date a year from now. So 3 months from now, I want them to have 5 letters. And 6 months from now, I want them to have 6 letters. And 7 months from now, or not 7, 9 months from now, I want them to have 7 letters. And then 12 months from now, I want them to have 8. And that gives you your behavior, or not behavior, excuse me, your benchmark desired outcome. Okay, so here's the complete formula in mathematical format, and if you don't like this, feel free to skip. First of all, we've got the desired outcome, which you divide by your task analysis, and that gives you your objectives. And the small n in this case means that there may be lots and lots of objectives. I don't know how many objectives there will end up being with whatever task analysis you have. You take those objectives and you put them through an assessment, and that gives you your present level of performance. This is all stuff we talked about before. You take the present level of performance and you want them to increase by a specific criterion, and a lot of times that's offered to us. You know, we want them to be at 75% accuracy by the end of a year. And to get your objective desired outcome, you're going to take your present level of performance and then you're going to add that to the present level of performance times your criterion. And that gives you an increase that may be appropriate. So for example, if you want your PLP and let's say that it is 50% and you want them to increase by 75% accuracy, you're going to take the PLP times 0.75 and you're going to take whatever that is. I don't have my work here. So 50 times 0.75, 0.520035, add it all together, 537.5. So you're going to take 50 plus 37.5. You want them to get to 87.5% by the end of the year, and that's your objective desired outcome. Benchmark, I'm going to split that up into smaller increments of time. Essentially, what you want to have happen is down here at the bottom. Any benchmarks that you have, when added together, you want them to reach the objective desired outcome. And then all of your objective desired outcomes that you write need to reach that desired outcome. And that's how you figure out whether or not a client has reached the termination point. Because if they've completed all of the objectives to their desired outcome, there's no reason for them to continue in therapy. Just isn't, without a reassessment and evaluation. Okay. And now it's time to start part 2. So just digest all this mathematical stuff, and I'll see you in the next video.